man, it's time for our top five. Top five. Tell them all about this. What was the concept again?
Well, since this month's theme is Thunderbolts, which the original concept was villains masquerading as heroes, I said, well, why don't we do our favorite villain cards? And then we briefly talked about, wait, is it best or favorite? And I went with favorite because then who can argue with you?
It's true.
You can argue that card A is better than card B, but you can't tell me that I don't like card A as much as card B.
That's right.
Well, I guess the purpose of these lists is to argue, but why do that? Why not listen to our top five, go on X at Snap Material and tell us your top five or just your favorite villain cards.
Right, exactly.
There are characters you'd feel terrible about rooting for in the comics, but you sure like to do your opponent dirty by playing them in Marvel.
Right. Yeah, I also did a combination, I guess you would say, of the best and the favorite that I have.
Yeah.
So you'll notice that as we get to the top that I specifically chose one because I think it's the best. I specifically chose another because it's my favorite. So
a lot of these, there may be some overlap from our list last time of characters we like better in Snap than in the comics, because a lot of these I like because of how good I think the cards are. So
true. Okay. All right.
So these are our favorite villain cards in the game.
I'll let you go first here, man. What's your number five?
Okay. Also a character I'm not too enthused about in the comics. Wasn't too enthused about when he first debuted in the game, but I've had to grudgingly admit that he's pretty good to use, and he's a whole lot easier to use now that I have a Dan Hip variant of him. It's Knull.
No. Okay. All right.
Destroy. I love the counterintuitive nature of Destroy. The whole point of this game is to get cards and build up their effects, and here we are destroying them. Shout out to Destroyer, who didn't quite make this list. But Knull's one of the best ways you can make that pay off. Just keep destroying your cards. Heck, destroy your opponent's cards too if you want to. And Knull is kind enough to collect all those points for you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Unless someone enchantresses or rogues him, or in a couple weeks, Red Guardians him.
Yes.
But that's only if he's the lowest power card. And chances are, if you've been destroying cards, he's not going to be.
He's not going to be. Nope. Good choice there. My number five is one I featured in the last battle we just did, and that is Doc Ock.
I figured he would be on your list. He almost made mine, but he's a little too chaotic for my tastes.
Yeah. That's obviously one big reason why I like him in Marvel Snap. The other reason is what a cool animation.
Yes.
Like you lay that card down and his little tentacles come out, they snap a few times, and they go up and they grab those other cards and they bring them down into the location. This is Doc Ock in this game, which is pretty cool. Doc Ock is my number five. Next up, my number four. And again, if we have overlap, I'll stop and we'll go with you if you got it higher. Okay. Number four, Dr. Doom.
Guess what? That's my number four.
Okay. All right. Well, then I guess I'll go ahead.
Doom is probably not happy to be ranked number four. Not only because it means we each have three villains higher than him, but also because it's a number that accursed Richards wears on his chest.
Oh, what a parallel there. Yeah, wow. Yeah, Dr. Doom.
Why do you like Dr. Doom, Jesse?
Well, hey, I think that Dr. Doom was a staple in a lot of decks, probably about, I don't know, at least 6 months ago, maybe even more, where he is 6 cost. And they even kind of, they ended up nerfing him a little bit, but then they buffed him again, if I remember correctly. But 6 cost, 15 power, but that 15 power gets spread across 3 lanes. And that helps. And if you can get him out there and you got to turn 7 and you throw out Odin, well, there's another 15 power that your sides are going to get. Also, I don't know if you've ever heard the term, as far as Marvel Snap goes, ramp. Have you heard that at all? Okay. So I don't know if I completely understand the concept, but my understanding
is... Kind of like a wild onion, right?
I guess. I don't know. Sure.
Okay, like building up. Okay, I got
building up. Yeah. So I think you get but Sandman out there. I actually have a deck I created not too long ago, Sandman, and then it has cards like Dr. Doom in there. But my goodness, great villain. and a great card to play because he will help your side win. And he's been on the side of good a couple times. He's always, but he's more of a more of somebody you want to be.
95% evil though.
Yeah, he's more of a person you want to be wary of. So anyway, how about you?
Arguably the best villain Marvel Comics has produced.
I absolutely 100% agree.
I used him a lot in the early days, and every time I think, maybe I've outgrown him, need a little bit more power. It's like, but 5 power instantly across all 3 lanes, maybe in the Sanctum Sanctorum, or maybe in a flooded area. It can make the difference.
Yes, it
can. And nice to pair with Patriot. But who doesn't want to work with Patriot? He's such an inspirational leader and legendary hero. So, and like you mentioned, Odin can fire up those Doom bots. Absorbing Man can bring you some Doom bots. And just, it's hard to capture every aspect of a character in a card, but some of them really nail one particular aspect. And Dr. Doom and his Doom bots, which often you don't know it's a Doom bot until you try to land that final blow and find out that Dr. Doom hasn't even been there the whole time. Right. So that's a cool representation of one of the really distinctive elements of Dr. Doom.
Agreed. Good choice. Good choice. All right. What's your number 3?
My number 3 is a villain who can be particularly dangerous to me when I'm playing against him. Maybe that's why I try so hard to make him work by teaming him up with his classic long-standing allies like Polaris, Stegron, and Arrow. All names that you immediately associate with Wilson Fisk, the kingpin of crime. I don't like the idea of large men stomping their enemies in real life, but it's a pretty cool animation.
Oh, yes, it is.
And so it used to be that he destroyed cards that moved onto his face in turn 6. Now he subtracts 2 from their power whenever they move into his territory. And if I've learned anything from reading Spider-Man and Daredevil over the years, you do not want to move in on the Kingpin's territory.
No, you do not.
So not another good representation. A lot of times he's got that suit, but that animation, it's a good effect and a representation of just how nasty Wilson Fisk can get. Although I prefer the variant with the big Hawaiian shirt.
Man, was him and Arrow hanging out all the time for quite a while. All the time. Good choice. All right, my number 3. Tell me if you've got this any higher. Magneto.
I do not.
Okay. All right.
Although he's Magneto. A good team up with the Kingpin.
Yeah, I was just sitting there. I thought that's where you were going. I was like, Polaris. All right, that's Magneto. Yeah. I thought that's exactly where you were going.
Yeah. No. Whenever I put Magneto and Kingpin together, I usually end up naming it Acts of Vengeance after that 80s crossover where all the villains traded opponents.
I love it. Yeah, Magneto for me. Listen, for the longest time, he was the guy that I relied on in one of my standard decks that really he throws a wrench into anybody's idea of how they're going to win a lane, because all of a sudden here comes Magneto and he's pulling stuff away and putting it into a lane that it wasn't in the first place. Whatever power was in those other lanes is now gone. And he has won the game for me many times, where just laying him out. So just by himself, just by laying him out, he's able to impact the game that much. And that makes him that much more of a versatile. That is a great word. A versatile card that you can put in just about any deck if you've got space for it. Magneto's the one to go. Great villain too. My goodness, there is, as far as iconic villains go, the mutant. My goodness,
Master of Magnetism.
Thank you very much. Mutant Master of Magnetism is not too shabby. All right, then.
I can certainly see why Magneto is an attractive choice for you.
Oh, look out. Oh, man. I don't know.
Some people might find that a polarizing choice.
All right. Number 2 on my top 5 villain Marvel Snap cards. And tell me, again, if you've got this, let me know. Thanos.
No, because I don't have that card, so I didn't really think about him.
And this is the first time I think it's backwards, where I actually thought of a card that I don't have, and you did not. There will be a lot of people out there that are going to argue that Thanos, as far as Marvel Snap goes, is the villain card. And that is because, well, it's called Marvel Snap. Who was the guy who Who was the person that snapped? Well, there's plenty of those around, but the first person that did it that made
Snapper Carr.
Snapper Carr was all around talking a bunch of he was hippy dippy and all over the place, and it was crazy. Marvel Snapper Carr. But no, Thanos is clearly what the game's that's the whole point of this game is Marvel Snap. There's something that happened with the Infinity Gauntlet. Thanos was probably behind it. Anytime you see those Infinity Stones show up across from you on the lanes, you know you're in for a fight. You just know that you are. So as far as power goes in the game, the ability that the card brings to the table, I've got it at number 2 because, like I said, there's my favorite, and then there is probably what the best one is. And I will say that Thanos is probably an argument for everybody to have, supporting that he's the best villain in this card game.
No room for M'Baku?
No, no room for M'Baku. All right, that's number 2. What about you?
Well, number 2 actually is going to make a return from last month's list. A guy that doesn't really move the needle for me as a villain in the comics, but that I have used a lot ever since he burst onto the scene, and that's Annihilus.
Oh yeah. He was on my list there for a few, but I took him off. Go ahead.
He highlights a deck that I usually return to once I start hitting the wall at some point, and just you can make some problems go away and cause your opponent some problems, sending those negative power cards across the way. And it used to include 0 power cards, but they nerfed them a little bit. But that just makes me try to think of ways to increase those negative power cards, whether it's bringing in his traditional comic book lieutenants, Debris and Hazmat. That's sarcasm. And or having Selene drag down a low power card into the negative zone. Yeah, see what I did there? And or sending back a goblin that just wasn't your size.
Good one.
Annihilus is a pretty effective foe and a bad guy that I don't mind trotting out against my opponents. Nice.
Very nice. All right. Then I believe you've got number 1 first here. So what is your number 1?
And actually probably should have figured into my top 5 last time. A guy who generates a hearty for me when he shows up in comics or cartoons, although not in the movies, though. I think we need a Michael Keaton variant of the Vulture.
The Vulture. Wow.
I have used him. He's been one of my favorites from the early days. Getting Ghost Spider is a nice partner for him. Great host of the Phoenix Force.
Yeah, okay.
When you move him from one location to another, he gains, I think it's 6 power now. It used to be 5. I'll take that extra +1. Team him up with Heimdall, Doctor Strange, Iron Fist, who I'm sure you remember from the classic 70s issues of Vulture Team Up. Just an effective card, a fun card to try to get to work, even though if he's not Michael Keaton, or my first choice for the cinematic Vulture, Creed Bratton from The Office, doesn't always work for me in the comic books, but works for me in Spider-Man Homecoming, and he works for me in Marvel Snap.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good pick, man. Yeah, as far as Marvel Snap goes, if he's in I wasn't using Move a whole lot until Hercules came along.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, good fastball special partner with Hercules.
Yes, sir. Good pick. That was kind of, I wasn't expecting that for some reason. I wasn't expecting Vulture, but I love how you definitely have some passion for it because of the films that you've seen and stuff like that. So I like that. That's really cool.
Also, can I share? I think I talked about this on here when it happened, but can I share my favorite Vulture play?
Yes, please.
I was in a game where 2 of the locations were the cloning vats and Asteroid M.
Oh my gosh.
And the best thing was it didn't just give me another Vulture to boost from 3 to 9. It cloned the Vulture at his higher rate.
Oh, yes, that's right.
Played a 3-cost Vulture. He got yanked over to Asteroid M at a 9. A 3-cost 9-power Vulture appeared in my hand.
That's
Next
great.
turn, I had a 3-cost 15-power Vulture perched at Asteroid M and a 3-cost 15-power Vulture in my hand.
Oh.
Good day.
Yeah, that's good stuff right there. That's real good. Well, speaking of locations, my number 1, as if it is unknown to what I'm going to say right now, as far as villains go, that is Legion. And I've just go back and listen to, I don't know, grab like 10 minutes out of every episode that we've ever talked about, and you could probably find me talking about Legion at some point. Yeah, clearly I'm a fan. It is my favorite villain slash card in this game. Whatever locations are featured now, it is like the thing for me. Like right now, as we're talking, Shuri's Lab is featured. So I'm already going like, okay, Legion works with this, how? And what can I do? Okay, Shang-Chi's going in a deck with Legion. I'm going and probably absorbing man as well. It's one of those things where I am constantly trying to figure out how to use this card to my advantage. And a lot of times the people on the other side of things have no idea what's going to be happening. It completely wrecks their strategy, because now they have to deal with whatever, provided it's a powerful enough location, but now they have to deal with, how am I going to make this work? And so as far as villains go in comic books, he's not one that's very popular. However, he's one that's been used. You've read more X-Men than I have, but we just read Legion Quest and talked about that. It's actually something that we've recorded and haven't aired it yet, but we've talked about Legion Quest. He's pretty much the reason for the Age of Apocalypse. He is also the son of one of the most powerful mutants out there, Charles Xavier. And a lot could be said like that David Haller, which is Legion's real name, is actually even more powerful than Professor X, and he's unhinged. So he's a cool character in my opinion too. He time travels back in time and accidentally kills his own dad, creating a massive paradox. And like I said, leads to the Age of Apocalypse. I can't gush much more about Legion, how much I love to put decks together that feature him and in order to throw wrenches into things. So number 1, top 5 villain Marvel Snap card, Legion for me. All right, there it is, Evan. We did it. We got through
Hang on, Jesse.
Oh, that's right.
I've got a bonus top 5.
Yes.
Because I didn't think this list would be very hard. And then it started getting bigger, but then I found a way to pretty much eliminate folks from it. And your number 1 actually is a great segue into it, because my favorite story is about Legion. He's not a villain at all.
Oh, okay. All right.
X-Men Legacy was a story that focused on him kind of trying to overcome his mental problems and deal with the legacy of his father and see if there was a better way to be an X-Man. And then one of the highlights of the Krakoa era was Way of X, that featured Legion and Nightcrawler trying to figure out what the heck was wrong with Krakoa. So one way that I kind of cut my list down was by taking off people who I'm not quite sure they're villains.
Okay, all right.
So I'm going to give you my top 5 favorite villain cards. Are they really villains, though? Edition.
Okay, all right. Can't wait.
And number 5 actually just popped on here because you mentioned him, is Magneto.
Okay.
Magneto's a bad dude, but for the last 10 years or so, he's been a stalwart member of the X-Men. And in the completely backwards, topsy-turvy world of Krakoa, he's been like one of the more reserved X-Men. Professor X is out here doing all kinds of crazy stuff, and Magneto's like, hey, Chuck, maybe dial it back a little. He was a hero when Uranos, I think, bad Eternals dude, was tearing through Mars, which has been renamed Rocco and colonized by the mutants, and it was Magneto who took him down. Sacrificed his life, despite the fact that he deleted himself from the Cerebro backups so he couldn't be brought back to life until the currently releasing Resurrection of Magneto limited series. Who didn't see that one coming? Mm-hmm. But Magneto, unquestionably one of the great Marvel villains, but also not totally a villain. At least not all the time. Okay, number 4. And I thought about him because I've liked using him a lot, but for one, I assuage my guilt over using him by using the heroic variant, and because he's not so much a villain as he is a force of nature. It's Galactus.
Ooh. Okay.
Yeah, it's terrible to go around destroying planets, but a dude's got to eat. that Subway sandwich, it may not want to be devoured, but I got to have lunch.
You got to eat. You got to eat.
So, and speaking of characters that are perceived as evil, but really, it's just them doing what they got to do. How about Death?
Yeah.
Death's a natural part of life. Sure, she gets a bad rap in the comics because Thanos is always trying to impress her, but come on. don't hold her responsible for her wannabe boyfriend's bad behavior.
True. Very true.
Another guy who I was like, how high up am I going to put him in my top 5? And now, to be fair, not everybody who gets a limited a title series or even an ongoing series in Marvel can qualify as a hero. We're on, heaven help us, our 3rd or 4th volume of Carnage by now, except for that brief, glorious moment in the otherwise forgettable Axis crossover where Carnage saves New York, and all he asks in return is that Spider-Man build a statue of him that blares Freebird 24/7. But that's not the symbiote I'm talking about. I'm talking about Venom.
Venom. Yeah.
Venom, you know, I like Destroy decks. I like him even better when I can feed that power to Knull and keep that power at the location. And have that sweet variant of Venom standing on a roof in a thunderstorm, only recently supplanted by a Dan Hip Venom. So,
but you can't.
He saved the world and the universe from Knull. He's still a protector. He's trying to be a little less lethal. So it just felt bad calling him a villain.
Fair enough.
And the number 1 villain, but is he really? Is a guy who I'm not even sure of his status quo in the comics because he's been supplanted by his more modern cinematic interpretation. An entry on many of my lists, and the number 1 entry on a lot of my lists, there's always room for M'Baku.
M'Baku.
I don't know. I haven't seen the M'Baku incarnation. I've only read him in pretty forgettable stories as Man-Ape, but we don't do that anymore. I think of him as Winston Duke in the MCU, and that's the version we get on the cards. So I didn't know if I could fully call him a villain, but I also hated to leave him off in a category where, even though I don't use him as much as I used to, in my heart, there's always room for M'Baku. I realize that's the 3rd time I made that joke, but I'm pretty sure that was the best. So that's my bonus top 5 favorite villains, but are they edition?
That's great. That is fantastic stuff right there. Great bonus top 5. Let's go ahead and get into plugs, man. What do you got going on over there? You've got Asterisk 51, I'm sure. I don't know if you've been over there hanging out with Billy doing some podcasts or anything like that.
Getting ready to do a few over on the Magazines and Monsters channel. Not only some more Zany, Haney, Brave and the Bold, but I believe I'm going to join Billy for a movie podcast.
Whoa. Wow, really?
I'm not necessarily a horror guy, but I don't know when it's going to air, but we found one that I featured on Dollar Tree Cinema, and he said, hey, I want to watch that one too. And I said, wait, you mean I have to watch it again? But I'm going to do it, and that'll be on. So, and look for listening on Magazines and Monsters, even when I'm not a guest. He does some fun stuff over there. And then, over at my blog, asterisk51.blogspot.com, making my way through the amalgam titles after a brief excursion into Dollar Tree Cinema Godzilla King of the Monsters edition, or as the French title also on the box says, Roi des Monstres.
Oh.
Yeah, you can get some good movies at Dollar Tree if you don't mind if it's the foreign title on the outside. You can still set the language track to English. So, working on that.
Okay. All right. Very cool. All right. Well, hey, ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to Snap Material, where Evan and myself jump into the Marvel mobile card game Marvel Snap. So check out previous episodes if you're interested in our thoughts on some of the previous seasons that's occurred. And there is the Source Material Comics podcast right now that has aired, I think, this week. The Mask returns. And if you've watched Jim Carrey's The Mask in theaters, well, be ready, because these comics are way different. A lot more violence come out from Dark Horse in the early 90s. Me and Mark Radlich discussed those, and we've had some pretty good discussions. So the second iteration of the comic book, The Mask Returns, is pretty good. So we had a fun discussion that aired this past Monday on the 1st of April. And then upcoming...
Those are the ones where the guys have the high-tech helmets that control cars that transform into fantastical machines?
Incorrect, sir. Not that mask. Not that mask.
All right, I better listen to the podcast.
Then next upcoming Monday, you can hear myself and Chris Armstrong discuss Darkman, the 3-issue comic series for the Unspoken Issues. That's what we're going to be discussing.
Speaking of Darkman, that flea market I told you about, that I went to the other day.
Yes.
I found Quasar number 17. I also found all 3 Darkman movies on DVD.
That's right, because I asked you, it's like I had no idea it was a trilogy. We get into a bit of a discussion about the second one, because he's a big Sam Raimi fan, and of course he was watching Darkman and has his own podcast there, Small Screeners. And from what I understand, 2 and 3 were, from 2, you were the one that told me about 3, but direct to video for sure. So anyway, we keep an eye out for that. It was an interesting discussion. So, all right. Well, with that being said, we are going to get out of here. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll be talking to you next month. That over there is Evan Bevins. I'm Jesse Starcher. Have a good one. Bye-bye.